If you're watching this video when it came out, then right now Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time Formula 1 world champion and has 103 Grand Prix wins under his belt. Yes, 103. That is more Grand Prix wins than there have been editions of the Le Mans 24 Hours. And Le Mans was born 62 years before Lewis Hamilton. And if you're watching this later, well then, who knows how many he has? Let us know in the comments. As with all supremely successful racing drivers, many of those wins have been quite straightforward, simply getting to the end of the race without anything going wrong. But a few races stand out as true showcases of just why Lewis Hamilton deserves to be considered one of F1's all-time great drivers. These are 8 of those incredible races. And if you are watching this video and you think at any point, you know what, they've done quite well, I really like that, then do remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to make sure you see absolutely everything from Goodwood Road and Racing. 2014 was the year that had to vindicate Hamilton's decision to jump from the cradle of McLaren, the team that had nurtured him since he was a boy, and into the corporate arms of Mercedes. When he made that jump, the latest version of Mercedes in Formula 1 had won one Grand Prix. 2014 didn't seem to start any better. Hamilton's engine dropped a cylinder on the start lane, and by lap 2 he was out in his civvies. By race 2, Hamilton had his iron, comfortably defeating teammate Nico Rosberg in Malaysia to pull back some of the gap he'd lost in Australia. In Bahrain, Hamilton again seemed to take a back seat, stuck second on the grid behind the pole-sitting Rosberg. If all went to plan, he'd probably just follow the German home for a safe 1-2. But Lewis got the better start. By turn 4 he led, and the Mercedes pair went about gapping the field as they've done so many times since. But it was clear that Rosberg was the faster of the pair, and come lap 19, he went on the attack. Rosberg briefly took the lead, but he could not rein his W05 in and ran wide, allowing Hamilton back into the head of the field. Come pit time, strategies were split, meaning that come the end of the race, Hamilton would probably lead, but be on the slower tyre. But in that time, he should have built up a gap on the faster tyre. Well, it turned out Pastor Maldonado didn't think so, because his decision to invert Esteban Gutierrez brought out the safety car, closed the gap, and left a straight two-way fight to the finish. Rosberg was still faster and had better tyres, and 10 laps to get past. Lap 1, he attacked. Hamilton fended him off. Lap 2, the same again. Lap 3, again. Time and again, Rosberg steamed up behind the Brit, only to find his way blocked. In the first proper all-Merc clash, Hamilton had come out on top. There's the odd 1 or 2 wins in the man from Stevenage's career that are more than a little controversial. In this case, the image of the Mercedes W09 wobbling across the curb and grass as Peter Bonington shouted,
"Hey man." No, sorry. Hey, just go.
Hamilton was reprimanded for a pit lane entry infraction. Some say he should have lost the win. We'll just focus on the racing. Putting that aside, it was one of Hamilton's greatest drives. Hydraulic issues in Q1 had left him languishing 14th on the grid, looking on as title rival Sebastian Vettel slapped his Ferrari on pole. In a dry start, Vettel walked away from the field, but behind him it took just 14 laps for Hamilton to climb to 5th. A podium was definitely on the cards, a chance to salvage some decent points. Then, as seems to often figure in Hamilton's driving history, it began to rain. Wets were not on the cards. This was just enough water to throw the odd spanner into the works, and then Sebastian Vettel drove right into one of those spanners. Off at the Sachs curve, he could only feel happy that his title contender was not in the lead, and with the pit drama we mentioned earlier, Hamilton was left stuck on old tyres while the rest of the field had pitted for fresh. Hamilton had teammate Valtteri Bottas behind him, fired up with fresh tyres and no team orders seemingly on the horizon. But, just like when he fought off Nico Rosberg in Bahrain, Hamilton would not yield to his teammates' attacks. Bottas slung his W09 up alongside Hamilton in such an aggressive mood that Mercedes bosses eventually told him to back off, assuring Hamilton a victory worthy of this list. What is it about Lewis Hamilton and the Hockenheimring that brings out absolute chaos among his team? In 2018, there was that entry mess. In 2019, his Mercedes team left him standing on the jacks for a full minute as fitting tyres to a car suddenly became an alien concept. 11 years earlier, it was McLaren's turn to have some brain fade at Hockenheim. This time, Hamilton had been by far the fastest man in Germany, on pole with ease and cruising 11.5 seconds clear of the field after 35 laps. This time, it didn't rain. Instead, the suspension on Timo Glock's Toyota decided it would much rather be shrapnel, and the safety car came out. Obviously, at this point, Hamilton was called in for a free pit stop and new tyres along with the rest of the field, except that he wasn't. Actually, he was left out on his own, trundling behind the safety car with old tyres as everyone else got some fresh boots and just caught up with him. This was where Lewis Hamilton gave us a first glimpse of what could be called his Schumacher act, when he bangs in a series of what are effectively qualifying laps time after time to ruin the rest of the field. He did it again in Imola in 2020 to completely kill Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas's chances of winning. In Hockenheim, in 9 laps he pulled so far clear he could emerge from the pits only down in 5th. He had 17 laps to change that. 15 laps later, he dispatched 3 cars and was second. He only had Nelson Piquet Jr. ahead, but he only had 2 laps to do it. Catching and passing Piquet was a doddle, though, and he sealed the most unlikely of comeback wins right at the death. Bono, my tyres are gone. It's just a meme these days. Of course Lewis Hamilton thinks his tyres are an issue. It normally means he's about to unleash some mighty laps. Mistrust of Hamilton's radio messages is valid, but in Monaco in 2019, he really was in trouble. It was another moment where a safety car brought odd decisions in the pit lane. When Charles Leclerc crashed on lap 11, everyone pitted, including Hamilton from the lead. Everyone went on to the hard tyres, which would, in theory, make it to the end. Well, everyone except you-know-who. Hamilton was stuck on the mediums and wasted no time in telling his team that he thought it was a mistake. He did have a point. There were 67 laps left. Okay. So we must admit that staying in front is an easier prospect in Monaco than anywhere else. See also Daniel Ricciardo's only Principality victory. But when you're driving on a set of what has effectively become some wet sponges, it's easier said than done. The race proceeded to become the tactical battle to end all tactical battles, a racecraft fight between 2 drivers who would become title rivals soon after. Behind Hamilton sat Max Verstappen, absolutely all over his gearbox and very, very eager to get past. While Verstappen tried constantly to get past, Hamilton raced tactically. He allowed the Dutchman to crawl all over the rear while managing his tyres and saving his hybrid boost before unleashing the stored energy before every DRS zone. In the end, Verstappen got desperate, hitting the back of the Merc on lap 76. Somehow, Hamilton seemed to spot the incoming Red Bull missile, rolling off the brake to reduce the severity of the impact. How he and the team must have felt after that win, just a matter of days after they lost mentor and team centre point Niki Lauda, is almost unimaginable. Not one, but 2 extraordinary performances. Yes, because of the sprint format, Hamilton had a little longer to get from back to front, but it really doesn't matter. Hamilton qualified on pole for the grid-setting sprint race, nearly half a second clear of title favourite Max Verstappen, but then his DRS flap was found to be ever so slightly illegal and he was sent to the back. Fortunately, he had the sprint race to regain a couple of those places, and he did, if you consider 15 places to be a couple, that is. While there was a legitimate fight at the front between Bottas and Verstappen, all eyes were on the black Merc absolutely tearing through the field like the other drivers were in Formula 2 cars. Considering he briefly got a little stuck behind one of the AlphaTauris, he actually demolished the rest of the field in probably 20 or so laps, and by the end of his charge, it wasn't Haas's and Williams's he had to pass, he was cruising past McLarens and Ferraris. Come race day, it was probably going to be harder. He had much faster cars to get past, but a podium was probably on. Of course, that's to forget the Mercedes took a new engine and Hamilton started 10th, not 5th. Time to grab some good points? A good return for a weekend that could have been a disaster? No. Instead, about 2/3 of the way through the race, he was wheel to wheel with Verstappen again. The two title contenders scrapped for the lead, with Verstappen employing some robust defensive tactics. But no mind, a few laps later Hamilton dispatched him too, making that the 24th car he'd passed of the weekend. Not bad, considering he'd started the race a net 25th in a field of 20. If Lewis Hamilton told the world it needed to pay attention to him in his debut 2007 season, then at the British Grand Prix he told the world to just sit back and relax, watch exactly what he could do. It was wet, British wet. Hamilton had been scruffy in qualifying and started second, behind teammate Heikki Kovalainen. But that was the last time Hamilton was scruffy all weekend. Off the line, he found grip no one else seemed to be able to, chasing Kovalainen through copse while behind them all hell broke loose. In short, Mark Webber spun on the hangar straight, David Coulthard and Sebastian Vettel collided and retired, Felipe Massa spun at bridge and then for a second time, all by lap 5. Hamilton tracked Kovalainen until that point, when he sent it, Mansell style, past the fin at Stowe. From then, the young Brit was imperious. Kimi Räikkönen briefly began to close, but when it began to rain again, just couldn't keep his tyres going, so joined practically everyone else in looping his car. By the end of the race, Hamilton was a full minute clear of second and had lapped everyone up to third. It was a showcase of extraordinary control and a level head on race day that would come to be a hallmark of Hamilton's racing later in his career. This is the one. The race that Sebastian Vettel was so amazed by, he had to go and tell Hamilton exactly how good it was before Lewis got out of his car. Nothing about the weekend worked for Mercedes. A new surface and rain caused slippery tarmac, and the W11s just could not handle it. Hamilton would eventually qualify 6th, Bottas 9th, and practically that was a front row lockout compared to FP1. There was no reason during the first half of the race to suspect anything would change either. Hamilton made no real progress. In fact, even when the leaders pitted, he showcased just how much of a not threat he was by slithering off and slipping back down to the safety of 6th again. Bottas was having even less fun, unless he was going for some kind of spins record, in which case he did well. But then the rain stopped. As the track dried, Hamilton decided to stick with his intermediate wets rather than pit for fresh ones. Rather than slowing down, Hamilton, on bruised rubber, began to speed up and move through the field. He passed several cars until he only had Sergio Perez's racing point to clear. And so he did, passing him on the track. Perez had also elected to keep the same tyres on, but had absolutely nothing on Hamilton's pace. Come the end of the race, Hamilton was 30 seconds clear of the field, still using the same set of intermediate tyres on a now completely dry track. Bottas was 14th. Those are the races that Lewis Hamilton has won that have made us sit up and really pay attention. But which are his greatest races for you? Let us know in the comments below.